I got a question for you. What does this city know about luxury? Huh? What does a town that's been to hell and back know about the finer things in life? Well, I'll tell you. More than most. You see, it's the hottest fires that make the hardest steel.
Hello, and welcome to the introduction for Lesson 6, which is on manufacturing and how technology is used. It's the introduction, that little video clip I included, shows there was a time that Detroit was the manufacturing center, probably of the world. That's why I'm wearing my Made in Detroit shirt. I was born in Detroit and grew up outside of Detroit. And I had a lot of involvement in the auto industry. My dad worked for a company that supplied parts for the auto industry. My friends from high school who didn't go on to college ended up working for General Motors, Ford, or Chrysler. And the whole economy in that area was based on the auto industry. It was a very important component for life in southeastern Michigan. It started there, you know. Henry Ford built that first plant in Rouge, River Rouge, where he had all the assemblies right there in one spot. He had the glass factory, he had the casting factory, the metalworking, everything was right there in one spot. In fact, when Ford invented or came up with the concept of the assembly line, the way it worked is the line didn't move, people moved from one station to another. And that really was the beginning of manufacturing and the Industrial Revolution as we know it, or we did know it at one time. The whole concept of how you do technology in manufacturing is important. Several years ago when I was working on a graduate degree, master's degree in economics, one of the courses I took was History of Economics. And in that course, our final paper, we were asked to write, how do you do economics? What this chapter is going to do is it's going to help you look at how do we do technology in manufacturing. It isn't just good enough to have all these wonderful robots and computers, but somehow we have to put them all together and come up with some concept of how to utilize them most efficiently. Now, we have some lean manufacturing things I'm going to talk about briefly today, and we have some manufacturing technology, and all this is going to be wrapped up with TQM, Total Quality Management, which is another type of doing Six Sigma, where you try to minimize the number of errors. Supply chain management. With supply chain management, what you try to do in creating something is you try to incorporate your suppliers so that they're assembling parts, so that when the part hits the manufacturer, a lot of the things that have to be assembled are already assembled. That makes it a cleaner, leaner manufacturing process. It also creates a lot of jobs for other people. Just-in-time manufacturing, JIT, was what was a process developed by the Japanese back in the 70s. We had a terrible time in southeastern Michigan. That people weren't buying American-made cars. They were buying foreign cars, primarily Japanese cars, because they were much cheaper and they were well put together. And the reason they were cheaper is the Japanese used this process called just-in-time. I taught for a very short time at General Motors Institute in Flint, Michigan. And we would go out into the factories and take students on tours so they could see how some of the manufacturing was done in plants. And you would see warehouses with enormous rolls of steel that was housed there. Well, with just-in-time manufacturing, you don't house all those there. What you do is you set your production schedule up in such a way that The steel doesn't arrive until it's needed. That way you're not paying the cost of inventory. Now the American process, the contrast to just-in-time, is materials requirement planning. What they did is they planned for the type of materials that were going to be needed. They were able to look ahead and see how many cars are going to be needed, or if you're building widgets or whatever, you would have marketing give you some idea of how much product was going to be required in the marketplace. And then you had manufacturers, the people in the manufacturing, and deciding how fast they would consume the goods to build those products. This is kind of like just in time, but it's just a little different. So be careful when you read this in your book to pay attention to try to determine what's the difference between JIT and MRP. Now, in terms of technology, manufacturing technology, rapid prototyping is something that's been relatively new. In effect, what this is, it's designing on the run. We see rapid prototyping done not only in manufacturing, but it's done in instructional design when, by some people. What you're doing is you're creating a process and you're testing it while you're doing the creation. And this has become a very popular process. There's also the cellular manufacturing, where you're putting together the small units. And so pay attention to that as you read it. The TQM, Total Quality Management, or Six Sigma, which is another type of TQM, these are ways that manufacturers, no matter what process they're using, they try to minimize the number of errors that are made. They try to maximize the quality output. You want to have less than a certain percentage of parts that are kicked out because they're out of spec. At one time, they were pretty good at doing this in Detroit. And hopefully, they may get back there again. It just depends. It just depends if they're able to find ways to use this new technology so that it would be most efficient in the way it's used and how it's used and the process that's used in manufacturing. So enjoy this lesson. There's a lot to be learned in there.
This is the Motor City, and this is what we do.